What is going on, guys? Today we are talking about rats. Recently, Ben kind of just got into it and he became a believer, and so today we're going to be talking about rat fishing and all the ways to do it, where to do it, and why it's so much fun.
Yeah, and it is a blast. And Geoff has been kicking my ass on the rat for several years now.
Yeah.
So finally, he has taught me his ways. So I'm excited to share the little bit of info I have, but really just kind of listen to you. I'm just here to make this look good.
He learned
honestly.
a lot. So if you guys are ready, let's get right into today's video.
Welcome to the Hookup Tackle. The Hookup Tackle is the world's largest showcase of Megabass products, featuring baits and colors not found at any other dealer. The Hookup also offers a wide display of OSP, Evergreen, Depths, Lucky Craft, Jackal, and many more. The Hookup Tackle is owned and operated by family, is staffed by guides and verified tackle nerds who love helping anglers elevate their craft. If you're in the Phoenix area, we'd love to have you stop by our showroom and check out the wonderful world of Megabass and the Hookup for yourself. If you shop online, there are almost 10,000 SKUs of Megabass products alone, with hundreds of other companies and new products being added daily. So next time you're looking for that hard-to-find bait, that color your fish have never seen before, or maybe you just want to elevate your game, look at thehookuptackle.com.
Welcome back, guys, to another exciting episode of the Hookup Tackle. I am Geoff at Jeffrey the King.
I am Ben at Tackle Otaku.
And we are the Hookup Tackle _USA. Today, we are talking about rats, and this is a fantastic time of the year to be fishing a rat. And it seems like, springtime is when the weather's starting to warm up. Mm-hmm. Life is starting to come back out and be more flush and just abundant. So we're seeing birds, we're seeing rats, we're seeing muskrats, we're seeing everything that's just life coming back. And so this is a great time of year because the fish are moving shallow, they're getting into trees, they're getting close to the banks, they're spawning, they're kind of pissed off, they're hungry, they're angry. Like, there's a lot going on with the fish. And in turn with that, you have rats, muskrats, you have baby birds, you have
mice,
all
snakes,
sorts of things, right?
Yep.
That are just
I watched you catch a turtle the other day.
Yep. There's a lot of different species right now that are moving shallow, or they're spawning, or they're mating, and this is a perfect time to fish a rat style bait. It does look like a rat, and it obviously resembles a rat, but it could also just be, like you said, a snake. It could be a baby bird. It could be just something on top of the water that's making a lot of noise, where the fish will see that and be like, oh, this is an easy meal. And so today we're going to just kind of break down where we're fishing a rat, why we're fishing a rat, and kind of the gear and stuff like that. So let's start with why fishing a rat is so good. So with a rat, like I said, the forage that the fish are feeding on this time of year is all over the place. It can be shad, it can be crawdads, but what a lot of people aren't thinking of is the mammals, the extraterrestrial stuff, like snakes and all that other stuff that do happen to fall in the water.
Yep.
Like, we have a lake out here, Lake Pleasant, and it rises like 30-40 feet pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so if you have rats or mice or snakes living in the rocks and the shore and the trees, that they might just get blown out.
Yeah,
and
they
go in
get
the water.
dislodged.
Yeah,
and they don't know
quick.
what's happening.
They're like,
they
whoa,
swim around and
my home is gone that I've been hibernating in for the past few months. Now I've got to swim around the lake, and those fish, they move up as soon as they do that. And so you'll have a tree, you'll throw this rat right by that tree, and dude, as soon as the rat hits the water, the fish will come out and you hit it. And it's like automatic because they're so used to oh, I've seen rats fly out of this tree before, and I'm just gonna eat it. It's an easy meal for those fish. And again, it could be a baby bird in a nest, and it drops into the water, and the fish are prepared. So a lot of times the fish are looking up, or they're cruising the shoreline just waiting to see something, and a rat is just a fantastic imitator for all sorts of different creatures. And what's cool with a rat is you can wake it on top of the water, but kind of what you were doing when you were fishing a rat was kind of cranking it down.
Yeah.
And it's odd how the bite can be kind of like that, where it's like, man, I'm waking it all day and I'm not getting bit. Let me just reel in this cast. Whoa. Oh, God. Like, maybe they want it just below the surface.
And I feel like a lot of times, too, especially when they're eating on the crank down, is that, yes, maybe they are associating it with a mammal or a rat or a bird or something that they've
Yep.
seen before. But I think a lot of times it's going back to what you said in the beginning. It's just, we always talk about that risk versus reward,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So here's this big thing that's making this beautiful sound, and swimming is very easy to go get.
Oh yeah.
That the amount of effort to go get it versus the huge high reward,
Yeah.
I think that goes through a bass's mind a lot. So
100%.
even, I mean, I've watched you catch fish in places that I've never once seen a fucking rat. I've lived there my entire life. There's nothing that looks like this
No.
that's ever swam through the water, and they eat it.
Yeah.
And dude, maybe they've been living their whole life like, fuck, if only I could eat a rat. Finally, there's
Finally,
a rat.
one comes.
Yes, right? But
Yep.
I think they're just positioned in a spot looking to eat, and then this easy ass meal comes, and they're just like, I have to eat it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's so many different things
There's a lot of
that
variables.
this could potentially be
Oh, 1,000%.
in a fish's world.
Yeah. But a lot of guys, I feel like they get the misconception like, oh, it's a rat. There's no way a fish is gonna eat a rat. That's just too stupid. But it's mind opening when you do fish a rat, because then you're starting to get bites where other lures aren't getting bites, and you're like, why is this thing just getting crushed? You know what I mean? And so it's a very odd thing when you first do it, but once you start getting bites and you start dialing in the rat, you can really have some fun and start really catching a lot of fish, and even big fish too,
Yeah,
on these
and
things.
what's exciting for me is, so before rats are really a thing in my world, you know, going back like 20 years, right? So we used to throw, like, Wake Juniors were like a staple for me,
Yeah.
right? And so, you know, these big, loud, squeaky wake baits, similar idea
Yeah,
to
basically
this,
the
really
same.
just more of a fish profile.
Mhm.
But the window was always so small. It was
Yeah.
these small little windows because they, you know, everything has this really exact speed. And I never really felt that it was a bait that I could go out kind of year round
Right.
and catch them on. And
Yeah.
now this is something that really, because of the versatility of going on the surface or crank down, there's a lot you can do with this.
There's a
thing.
lot, and
Yeah.
you can fish it around a wide variety of different things.
Yeah.
From tules to trees to grass to rock to walls, and like everywhere I've thrown this thing, I've gotten bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be on a big body of water. I mean, my favorite place to throw a rat is urban fishing. I mean, that's where I've seen, you know, the rats and the mice, and sometimes you find floating ones, you know, at the urban stuff, and you're like, oh, yeah. I mean, I can see why a fish would eat that. And then you throw a rat out there and they eat it. They crush it out there, and you're like, whoa. That's cool to know, like, if a mice does fall in the water, and the urban spots here in Arizona, it's all concrete all around. So if something falls in, it's not getting out.
Right.
And that thing's just on
It's
the
struggling to get.
it's on the sidewall, and it's trying to like find a spot, and that thing literally pins itself on the surface up against the wall, and a bass like, oh, that's too easy, and it's gonna crush it. So a lot of times when I'm fishing in an urban spot, all I do is just get it as close as I can just to the bank and just reel it in, and you get some insane bites when you do that. So with the rat, it seems like, for me, parallel is one of the best ways to imitate what a real, you know, rat, mice, squirrel, whatever would be doing in real life. You'll see that they're kind of parallel with the bank, trying to find a place to get on the bank or whatever like that. So it's like the small things. It's kind of just like throwing a buzzbait where you're going to parallel it as well.
Yeah.
It's very similar to normal bass fishing. It's just you're fishing something that might look a little bit odd, and you know, it gets bit.
Yeah. So getting back to really quick, Geoff, you know, out of the box, these are going to float.
Yeah.
And they're gonna be designed really as kind of a wake bait or a topwater type
Yep.
movement.
Yep.
When do you decide if you're gonna fish it right on top, if you're gonna speed it up, if you're gonna slow it down? Like, talk to me about your retrieves and your thought process and how you determine what you're gonna do with this bait. Because one of the things that's cool is it's pretty much just a cast and wind
Oh yeah.
kind of deal. You're not ever
not doing a
really
whole
jerking
lot.
or twitching because
Yeah.
there's just too many things that can get wrapped and
Yeah.
can go south on it, right?
Mhm.
So it's a really easy kind of, I don't know, I guess it's not really a swim bait, but kind of like it's a really easy big bait
To fish.
for somebody to get into,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But how do you determine the speed, the depth, like what's going through your mind in breaking that down?
So it's kind of like most things, you're gonna start with something that you're comfortable with, and then if the fish aren't responding to it enough, or you're getting fallers or something's wrong, then you're like, okay, I need to change something with the bait to get these fish to commit. So out the gate, I'm gonna start my morning, or whenever I'm fishing a rat, cast and wind, and just a slow, steady retrieve, keep it up on the surface, and just get the bait to click, clack, click, clack. And sometimes it's nice, like on some of the clearer bodies of water that we have here, you could see the fish follow. Like when you were throwing the rat, you had some fish follow, and you were like, what are they doing? Like, why are they not committing to it? And so then in your mind, you're like, okay, they're not committing to just the straight retrieve. What do I need to do? So the next time you cast in a spot, instead of just straight retrieving it out of like the little zone, you might give it some twitches. See if like maybe they want like just a bait to kind of walk in place a little. And then you might get bait and you're like, okay, they want it kind of in place and then walked out. Or you might be reeling it in and you're like, dang, dude, like, I've been fishing this rat for 2 hours, 3 hours, and I'm just not getting a bite. You make that cast, whatever, you're reeling it in, and you speed it up to make another cast, and the bait just goes below the surface. Boom, you get bit. And you're like, whoa, all day I've been fishing this thing slow and steady on top of the water, nothing. And I go to make another cast, and I'm burning it back in, and it goes just like maybe like 6 inches under the water, and boom, I get bit.
They smoke it.
Dude, that's a trigger right there in your mind, like, okay, they want it faster, and they don't want it up top for whatever reason. They just want it just a little bit below the surface, maybe more like a wake bait instead of like or like a subsurface bait instead of like a true wake bait. And so it's like the fish will tell you certain things about the rat. But for me, like I said, you start with just a straight retrieve. They normally will bite it. If they don't do it, try doing some twitches, walk on itself, or you can just try speeding up. And once you dial it in, you're pretty much going for the day.
Yeah.
Like when you were fishing the rat all day on the surface and you just weren't getting bit. We're fishing with Gary's
Why like a crankbait?
Yeah. And you're like, why am I not getting bit? And then finally you're just like, oh, this one.
Yeah.
And like as soon as it got just below the surface, they started to eat it. And like on that specific body of water, what we had noticed, because they weren't eating the frog at all. And we noticed like there's probably just too much water above their heads for them to be like, that was 6 inches lower.
Yeah.
I would eat it. But it's weird how bass will get very picky on exactly how far of a distance they will go to travel to eat a bait. Sometimes it really is just right below the surface that they're going to eat a rat, or it's right on top. And it kind of can depend on the body of water, the depth. It can also depend on wind, time of day. And so you kind of just have to experiment, but you kind of just start with the basics and then just kind of like change as it goes along.
And I think that what you just touched base on is an important thing for a lot of us to think of. A lot of guys are fishing lakes.
Yeah.
Right? So they're going to be very stable water. You're going to go on Monday and you're going to go back on Wednesday, and the shit's going to be in the same place. Right?
Exactly.
But a lot of us are fishing tidal or river systems or something that can fluctuate.
Yep. Yeah.
And, one of our favorite times to throw a frog is when that water gets skinny.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, basically from now, our Griff's been throwing since like December.
Yeah.
But
he's special.
Right. But, now all the way, until winter, basically anytime those fish are in really skinny water is just a great time to get them on a frog, because there's so little water and that thing is right close to their head that there's an instinct there. But when it fills up, so you could go to place of the California Delta or our Colorado River or Louisiana Delta or any of these places, and when that water is down and it's compressed to the fish, a frog is really tough to beat. But then all of a sudden the water goes up and it kind of floods and they're just not eating the frog. This can make a great alternative to a frog, because it's basically, you can fish in a lot of the same areas, but you can get it down just slightly deeper. It's a little bit louder, something just a little different than a frog.
And that's basically the reason why you do fish a rat, because it's different than what most guys are fishing, where the top water or subsurface. These things have a very specific sound to them. I think the 3-piece has one of the best sounds ever.
It's like the most beautiful sound.
I don't know what it is, but it just sounds so good. And when you get one of those calm mornings and you're throwing the 3-piece or even the 2-piece, and you just hear that thing out there click back, dude, I know the fish can hear it, I know they can see it, and you just kind of wait in anticipation, and then you finally get that bite.
Yep.
And speaking of the bites, I tell most guys, when you're gonna fish a rat, you're probably gonna get 1 or 2 bites. first bite, you're gonna be casting, you're gonna be winding, and you kind of like look away or just stop paying attention, and then you look back and you're like, where's my rat? And then you look closer and there's a fish just doing this. And sometimes what those fish will do is they kind of just come up from behind and just suck it down, right? And so you kind of sometimes have to be paying attention, because sometimes you just miss them. I've seen a lot of dudes where they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, you just got bit. They're like, huh? No, I didn't. I didn't feel it. I'm like, yeah, because it sucked it down like super light and it spat it because you weren't paying attention. And it happens a lot, even with some of like these bigger rats. It's wild.
Yeah.
Or the other bite, they literally just blast it out of the water.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to see that, because in my mind, they think like, all right, this is a rat. I've eaten a rat before. It's got claws, it's got teeth, it can mess me up. So I've got to either just like one shot it, or I've got to hit it as hard as I can to kill it.
Almost stun it, right?
Yeah. Yep. And so you get some exciting bites on the rat that you just won't get sometimes on other things. And it's just a great alternate if you guys know that there's some type of other animal that the fish are feeding on, whether it be snakes, rats, mice, and so on and so forth. And I throw the rat from now until, fall.
Yeah.
Just like the water needs to be at least 60 degrees. I know guys that will catch them even like lower than that, but for the most part, 60 degrees and higher. At nighttime, it's a great time as well to fish a rat. Like, you can really fish a rat just day in, day out. No wind, high winds. Like, it really doesn't matter.
You kind of just need fish to be relatively shallow.
Yeah, and that's basically it. That's the ticket with a rat. So
do you ever think the rat is literally the very best thing out of everything in the store? Do you think that the rat is the #1 best thing you could possibly throw at the lake to catch fish that day? Or do you think just the fun factor of catching on the rat just overshadows the first question?
I think there's very similar baits, like a gong or just any type of wake bait can do very similar things to a rat, but I do like the multi-piece bait of the rat. I like the sound, I like the profile, I like the swim of them. I don't think that, there's definitely been times where I'm throwing a rat and I'm catching fish while other guys aren't on top waters.
True.
Where they're throwing, a buzz bait, or they're throwing, a different style of wake bait. They're just not getting bit.
Yeah.
And then I
think of how many times you and I have gone out where you've been on a rat bite.
Oh yeah, and you throw some other wake bait.
Okay, well they're gonna crush all these other amazing wake baits, and they don't even touch
they
that
don't
shit.
touch it.
And then you go to the rat and they eat it. And it's like, all right, well,
and
I
it's
guess
like,
the rat was the right thing.
It's very strange how it can be like that, and thankfully it's kind of like that, because a lot of guys overlook it and they don't throw it as much. And so, like the bite we were on at, with Gary, it literally seemed like the rat was the only thing.
Yeah, they just wanted that stupid thing. Right. Yeah. So sometimes they do just want it, but the fun factor is sky high.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
It's so fun to throw, but it's even more fun to see a bass come in the boat and it's got this big thing. You know what I mean? It's
so rad,
it's really a cool way to do it.
Well, I think your second or third bite on the rat, that fish came 30 feet.
Oh,
to come out and eat it. You were like, yo, there's a fish on my bait. And we all looked, and he's just reeling it, and there's this fish on it. And it kind of like backed off, but then he started twitching and speeding up. And that fish was like, oh, it's going down. I'm going to go eat this thing.
Yeah.
And it came, and then it just ate it.
And I think it's similar to like a glide bait. It's important if you're paying attention, you're seeing fish follow. You can't just kill it. You can't freeze.
Yeah, you can't
right?
do that.
You can't like, oh, and freeze and stop. And the fish looking at it's like, oh, that shit ain't real.
Oh, okay, I'm out.
Yeah, right? So you have to like work through, you want to see them and get whatever feedback that fish is giving you, but almost always if they're coming out for something like this, there's some kind of trigger point. Yeah. So you got to do something to try to get it to react. It's interested enough that usually just simply speeding up or twitching it or something hopefully will draw some kind of strike out of it. Yeah.
Well, this was really your first time throwing a rat. How did you feel was the easeability of it? To throw it, to fish it, and just overall, how was it fishing a rat?
Yeah, so it's like I said, it's very similar style fishing to something like a Wake Junior, a Sonic Killer, some type of wake bait type bait. But I feel like it just had maybe a little more versatility to it, right? So I think the most important thing for guys when they're going to get into this is, you know, even though it's a relatively big bait, like you've got a pretty big bait, they're not that heavy.
No, they're pretty lightweight.
Right? So, I mean, I don't know what that 3-piece PB rat weighs, but it's probably like 3 ounces. Yeah. So, you kind of need some specialized gear, but you don't need to go too crazy.
No.
The one big thing that I did notice with these, though, is, you know, having the right equipment is going to be really important. For you guys
in the long run.
So, you know, let's talk about that for a minute and talk about rods and talk about some pros and cons to what we're doing. So, you know, speaking of rods, break down, why don't you start and break down kind of what you think is the best rod, because you and me are in full agreement here on the rod and the gear. Then I'll kind of talk about, you know, what I was using around some of the skinny stuff and the pros and cons of how it all broke down.
Okay, so for me, I'm looking for either a heavy or an extra heavy rod that's, you know, 7.6 to 8 foot. So you have some length to, if you want to, you know, bomb a rat down a bank or whatever, or it's still semi-short enough. It's not like an 8.3 or an 8.6 to where you can pitch it into like some holes or just make accurate casts. Something a little parabolic. So like this rod would be the Megabass, the Casino 2 to 6 ounce rod. This rod has the right bend to it. It loads up, and again, you're using a treble hook style bait on top of the water. So you want something when they do suck it down, the rod's not too stiff and it's pulling the bait away from them. It's soft enough to where you can give it some action. You can give it some twitches. And so something a little bit softer is going to go a long way. Again, I like something that's in that heavy to extra heavy, something that loads anywhere from 7.6 to 8 foot. The reel that I like to use is, I use our round reel at the moment, and it's a 6-to-1 gear ratio reel. Now, some guys, like I know you were fishing something a lot faster than what I would do. And the reason why I like something just a little bit slow is because for the most part, I like to fish this thing as a wake bait right on the surface. And you have to kind of find that right speed, but if you reel it in too fast, it's gonna kind of subsurface. And it's like, all right, I need to slow down. And that's what I would have to say to myself if I was using a fast reel. But something with the 6-to-1 and I'm burning bang, my trolling motor's on high and I'm just trying to cover water, I can reel just at a normal speed and it'll stay on top of the water. Now, the reel is fast enough still, I can just speed it up and kind of crank it down still if I wanted to get on a bite like that. So 6-to-1 for me is really good. It doesn't matter if it's a low profile reel or a round reel. This just happens to be a Ryoga, but it's basically the same reel that I use. I use just a Megabass Lin. So this is pretty much the setup. I use Fluorocarbon. Now this might come as a surprise, but I like to use Fluorocarbon just because even on a long cast, you're maintaining contact with the bait. There's not a whole lot of slack going on like you would with, you know, other top water baits. So it's kind of like a buzzbait in a sense where it's like, you got constant contact with it. And I just like Fluorocarbon overall. Just, it's always on my reels.
Because you're used to it.
I'm so used to it.
Right.
Casts great.
I think that's probably the most important thing when you're talking about big baits. There's so much shit that can go wrong.
Right.
It can go wrong on the cast. It could go wrong on the retrieve. It could go wrong on the hook set. It could go wrong on the fighting the fish. Like, there's all these possibilities that can derail. That you want to be as comfortable as you can with your gear, so you know instinctively right and wrong. Versus like, well, I wonder what the line's going to do now. Right. So yeah, I'm with you. I think fluoro is
like fluoro
definitely the way to go. 95% of the time.
I would say 95. Yeah.
If you're fishing skinny water, one of the rods that I've been using a lot, really over the last kind of year since it's been out on the market, has been the Tequila Baccarac. Now, typically for something like this, I would be throwing like the Casino or the Blackjack, or maybe like the 7.4 Valkyrie, something. I think that extra length, that 7.5 to 8 foot, is really important if you're going to really enjoy casting these.
Yes, I think so.
Because you need that rod to have some leverage to really be able to load and propel the bait, whether it's a rat, whether it's a glide bait, you know, anything in this kind of 2, 3, 4 ounce range. But sometimes you're just in a bunch of shit, and there's not enough room to take an 8-foot rod and make a big cast. And so, you know, I find that a shorter rod, like a 7-foot rod like this, and there's several of them. I like this one because it goes up to 4 ounces, so you can just do a ton of different stuff on it. It really helps you in close range, you know, more pitching stuff. So especially if you're gonna fish behind somebody. So like if Geoff and I are fishing together, or like I'm fishing with Gary, right? Whoever's in the front is getting the glory cast, right? Yeah. They're gonna make the long cast. They're gonna get the best angle, and the dude in the back can either pull a griff and just bitch about staring at rocks all day, or he can just kind of pick apart and do shorter little pitches and pick little lanes and just make these shorter, more accurate casts. And that's where this is a great rod. The downside to going to a short rod is, again, getting back to what you said, it's a big bait. It's got treble hooks. You want that rod to be able to give and to bend. Yeah. And sometimes I don't think the shorter rod has enough give. Shit happens too fast.
It's really fast.
And sometimes it's a little too fast, and you see the fish eat and you feel it, and your body just instinctively flinches or sets, or you know what I mean? Yeah. Something happens to where it's like you almost need that process to slow.
Just a hair.
Just a touch, right? Now, if you guys are fishing around a lot of grass, a lot of tules, so like if you're in the south, if you're fishing a tidal water, you're fishing somewhere where you're going to be throwing these rats, and potentially they're gonna hook into a tule or some grass or something like that, then I would throw a braid on it. Yeah. So I always go 70 pound Samurai. It's kind of my go-to. A 65 to 80 pound braid would be the best. Believe it or not, the thicker the braid, the easier it casts a bait like this. It seems counterproductive. It's kind of the opposite of fluorocarbon, right? Where the thinner the fluorocarbon, the easier it is to cast. Braid's kind of the opposite way. The thicker it is, the easier it is to cast because it doesn't dig as much. So, you know, don't be afraid to go to 70 or 80 pound braid. What's nice about doing that is if you do get it on a tule or on some grass, you can just kind of pull it off and pop it, and then just keep fishing. Whereas fluorocarbon would drive you nuts.
Oh, you'd lose your mind.
You would just spend all day going into the tules, unhooking your rat, right? So there is a reason for, you know, going with the braid, but if you guys aren't dealing with that aquatic vegetation or those tules, I definitely think fluoro.
I think fluoro.
And the longer rod is definitely the better way to go.
I mean, when we were fishing with Gary, it kind of didn't even cross my mind of exactly what we would be fishing, and it was a lot of tule base, and a lot of the things that we were having to cast into is a lane about big tules all around. So if you're off by just a hair, you're in the shit. Right. So after a while, just watching Ben, you know, he'd make a cast, or there's like one laying down or whatever, being able to just go and make that cast, it's like you'd probably be breaking knots and line and stuff on the floor.
And you know as well as anybody that even if you're really good, right, and you have the technique and you have the skills to make these really great accurate casts, it comes down to confidence. Once your confidence is shook just a little bit, then you flinch or you tighten up, and then all of a sudden your bait's headed straight, and then it veers to the left, and then you're stuck, right? Yeah. So having the confidence to know that, dude, if I fuck this up, I'm just gonna yank and shit's coming back. Right? And I'm not gonna screw up this whole So that's the nice thing about having the braid is it gives you the confidence to know that just go for it. Just make the cast, be comfortable. If you fuck it up, you're pulling it out, and you know you're on to the next.
And I think like the one thing with that braid is I feel like you get them good. Like when you hook them, they're good, because the braid with that no stretch and that short rod, it just seemed like you get bit and you're like, cool. You don't need to set the hook at all.
Well, I think that's super critical. If you set the hook, you're gonna lose that fish.
You're gonna lose a lot.
And it's really hard when you're fishing something so cool. That's moving, and all of a sudden something T-bones it, like all you want to do is just like, fuck yeah, you know, but you can't. You literally just have to just wind because the rod and the line just set the hook for you.
Basically.
If you yank too, then you've just basically ripped the left side of the fish's face off. And
that fish is gone.
You get nothing.
Or, you know, what happened with you with that big one, or just in general, where you might get one to eat it like super aggressively, and you flinch and you just swing just a little too late.
Yep.
And you think to yourself like, dude, I swear it had it. I swear it had it.
Right.
In actuality, it didn't have it. And it's like sometimes having just the patience to just not swing is good.
It's a lot like a buzzbait.
Very similar to a
very
buzzbait.
similar. So if you guys haven't been throwing rats, but you're really efficient at buzzbaits,
Oh, dude,
it's a
this is it.
lot of the same thing where you get the bite, and instead of like really, flinching and jerking, you get the bite or you get the suck, and you just kind of turn, and once you know that it's loaded, then you've got them.
You got 'em,
but if
yeah.
you don't feel that load, you fight your instinct to just keep winding and
Yep.
not set, and then a lot of times they'll come back
come
for
back
it,
and
or
eat it.
something else will happen. So,
Because I mean, if they do miss it, they've already spent a lot of energy to come and get this. They normally will just finish the job.
Yeah.
They're not gonna come all that way, try that hard to just let it go. Sometimes you're able to get another cast in there pretty quick, twitch it a couple times, and then eat it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So
Yep.
the rat is just a fantastic way to catch some fish throughout spring, summer, and fall, whether it be at nighttime, urban, big lakes, small lakes. It seems like you can really fish these things anywhere. And we talked about the peeper rat. It's my favorite rat. And I think you're a fan of it.
Yep.
But the spur rat does.
Spur
good.
rat's great
Gary
too.
absolutely
Yep.
killed him on that.
Yep.
I know
There's a lot of really good rats. There's a
There
lot of
is.
small bait makers that make
'em.
great rats.
Yep.
So, if you dive down this rabbit hole, you guys may find all kinds of different,
Oh yeah.
varieties of these things that create different sounds, different looks, right? I don't even know why I'm asking this question, but you don't give a fuck about color, do you?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing with me with the rat,
It's super important, by the way.
I've caught him on straight gray. I've caught him on brown. I've caught him on white. I've caught him all different colors. And it's like, really, for me, it goes, and I think this is just the logical thing. It goes action, presentation, timing, color.
I agree.
You know what I mean? At the end of the day, I don't think I've ever had a fish come up to my rat and be like, damn, if that thing was a different color.
A black rat instead of that
oh,
gray.
And that thing's eyeballing it, like,
Right.
I want to eat this thing so bad, but it's not. Like, I've never really had that. I'm sure there was maybe days where I'm like, maybe I should have gone with the black instead of a white, but it's kind of like frog fishing. Some days you throw a black frog,
Right.
and some days you throw a white.
Right.
And it's like, it's kind of the very similar type of thing, and sometimes you can differ, but all you would need is a white rat, white, black, gray, and a brown.
Yeah.
Really, those are really
Right.
just the colors.
And then
that I
anything
pick.
else beyond that
Yeah.
is for fun.
Just for fun.
Right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, you see pink rats and purple
Yeah.
rats and all kinds of shit. And, dude, I don't know. Maybe there's a time where they just want a pink fucking rat.
Yep.
I don't know. But I think it's more than anything, it's fun.
It's just
right
fun.
at that point.
It's just a really fun bite.
Yeah.
All right, guys. If you have any other questions about rat fishing, let us know with a comment down below. I will try and get to them as best I can. If you guys, how do you do these?
Have you
outros?
done this before?
It has been.
Do you want me to do the outro?
I will leave a link to the products that we use down in the description below.
You want me to leave the link?
I don't know if you're editing this. I hope not.
Oh, me too. That sounds like a lot of work. I'd rather go fishing.
Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys on the next episode.
Peace out, my friends.